Hail, and welcome back to Elder Futhark, Rune Divination 101. Today we are discussing the rune of Laguz, the rune of water. It has been quite some time, almost 8 months, since I last uploaded one of these videos. As I have repeatedly mentioned throughout my last several videos that I uploaded, Laguz has been quite a ride, shall we say. I have felt at times that I was a surfer riding massive waves. I can frankly not put it any other way. There have been very exciting things that happened and very, well, not so exciting things that have happened. So I don't really have, other than the things that I will be sharing with you guys in this video, really any other news other than, well, I'm glad to finally be able to finalize my initiation into this rune. But we will get more on that as soon as we have officially gotten started, so let's get started. The rune poem, as you have seen at the beginning of this video, is taken from the old Icelandic rune poem. I felt that that was the most fitting one for Laguz, because the Elder Futhark obviously does not have a rune poem attached to it. There is the the Norwegian rune poem, there's the Anglo-Saxon Futhark rune poem, and then there's the old Icelandic rune poem. And so sometimes when I pick these verses, I just decide which one I feel resonates best with the energies behind the Elder Futhark version of a particular rune, or a rendition of a rune that carries a certain energy with it, because not every rune system has the exact same meaning attached to runes that may at first glance be, roughly the same or the same. So, Laguz, as I said, it is the rune of water. The rune poem says, "Water is eddying stream and broad geyser and land of the fish." Now, I found this a very interesting rune poem because of the very, very comprehensive, in-depth meaning that Laguz has as a rune in and of itself, the meanings that it encompasses. The eddying stream. An eddying stream is a nice, steady stream. It is a stream that is not harmful, usually, to a human being. In fact, I would say that it is for most people very soothing and invigorating. At least I know for me it is. Then again, I am a water sign. I am a Pisces, although I was born dead on the Aries cusp. So I do have somewhat of an affinity to water, strangely enough, I have noticed. Perhaps not strangely enough, I suppose. I do find that water has a very calming energy on me. For example, I listen to rain sounds a lot when I sleep because of, I sometimes do have some difficulty falling asleep because of certain, well, gifts I have, shall we say, because I need some sort of sound to relax my mind, to be able to divide my attention away from certain things. And yeah, water is one of those very key elements with which I always find peace and soothing and comfort, really. I mean, I have mentioned, I believe, in the past that when I sit in baths, I usually write the scripts for these rune videos, or indeed for many other of my videos, although not most of them, but always, without fail, whenever I write a script for my runic videos, I always do that in a bath, because I just find the energy to be very grounding. It gets the creative energies and, well, the juices, no pun intended, flowing. So yeah, a broad geyser. Well, a geyser is, of course, a very hot, violent natural occurrence. It is hot, boiling water that gets shot up into the air. And at times, I have to say that my initiation into Laguz quite literally became quite hot. And I'm not using that as a, again, sexual innuendo or anything of the sort. I'm really just saying that because, well, of things that I will be getting into later into the video. Of course, land of the fish. Now that is a very interesting thing, of course, because as we will be discussing, Laguz has to do with wealth and with bounty and all that sort of stuff, and fishing was for many Germanic tribes, including, of course, the Scandinavian tribes. They relied on fishing for a part of their food, a part of their income, a part of their trade. Even in my country of origin, the Netherlands or Holland, we have a lot of traditions where it is, related to fish, the eating of fish. The first catch is usually celebrated by, eating like herring. We call it Dutch new or Hollandse nieuwe. And yeah, so it's something that I found personally a bit something to connect to there, because fish is of course something that swims in water. Laguz is the water rune. I am a Pisces, symbolized by two fishes swimming in opposite directions, but always in tandem with each other. So there is a sort of a duality there that we see with Laguz, and again we will get into that later on in the video. So, to move on with the basic information, the general information of this rune, it is the 21st rune in the Elder Futhark, thus making it the 5th rune in the third and final Aett. Laguz means lake or water, that is the literal translation. The modern day letter equivalent is the letter L, such as in lake or log or lunar or luna or something like that. So basically anything that starts with an L or, well, the associated astrological body is the moon, due to the water's association with the lunar energies and lunar aspects. Of course, the moon regulates the tides. It regulates the way that the tides flow and ebb, and yeah, so there is a very strong lunar connection between water and lunar energies. And those of you that have worked with water magic, those of you that have worked with lunar energies, which is traditionally seen as a very feminine energy, which is funny because Laguz is considered traditionally a very feminine rune in its expressions of the natural universal energies. So there is a very strong connection between the feminine, between the moon, and between water that this rune embodies and symbolizes. And then, of course, the associated element is, of course, pretty obviously water, because it is the water rune. So the associated deities are Njord, the god of the sea, the god of wealth, the god of trade. I have made a video on him in my Gods and Goddesses series. It was in fact the first deity that I did a video on in that series. And part of the reason that was is because when I started my initiation into Laguz a little bit in, I felt the urge to contact Njord to make a contract with him on various topics. For example, finances. However, little did I know that my initiation into Laguz would go a little bit differently. That is not to say that my contract with Njord either failed or in some way, shape, or form is now invalid. That is not what I am saying, but again, we will be discussing that in a little bit. So the other god, or goddess I should say, that is associated with Laguz is Nerfus, at times said to be the consort of Njord. In other words, Njord is the god of the sea, and then Nerfus is the Earth Mother goddess. Now, it is very interesting to me that Nerfus is often considered to be a deity that is associated with this rune, even though she is an earth deity, and we have also discussed Nerfus, of course, in Burkana, which was a very earthy rune, very feminine as well, also a healing rune like Laguz often is. And Nerfus is traditionally said to have received sacrifices of drowned slaves. Now, I find it peculiar that she receives sacrifices in water when her consort, Njord, is the water deity. One could almost perhaps think that it was her way of giving perhaps offerings to her consort rather than receiving it for herself. It is a very interesting thing to me as well, because without earth, water would of course not have the abilities to sustain its form. Earth is, of course, at the end of the day, the very foundation of our planet. If the Earth was not shaped the way it was, the oceans would not take the shape that they have, that they used to have in the past, when continents were allocated differently, were organized differently. And how they will look in the future will likely, of course, change in the very distant future, depending on the movements of the Earth and the tectonic plates and everything related to the Earth. So there is a very strong connection, of course, between water and Earth. They are interlocked and intertwined, because the Earth would just be without water, of course, to counterbalance that form holding that Earth provides water. There is a need for water to nurture the things, the productive things, the beautiful things of the Earth. Without water, Earth would be a dry, stale rock of just, boringness, and just there would be nothing on it. It is through water and through rain and through flooding, like for example you see in the Egyptian myths with the Nile when it floods. There's a fertilization aspect there. So there is a very strong connection between the nurturing back and forth. Earth provides a solid framework for water to do its thing, and water in return pays Earth for that structuring with the feeding and nurturing, not neutralizing, nurturing and fertilizing of the soil. And of course, us as human beings who are also greatly reliant on the power of water and Earth both, because we rely on our crops, on our, on our livestock, on all these things that rely in turn on Earth and water to survive and to thrive. So there is a, like I said, very strong balance that is required and necessary. And of course, as I said, for many ancients, the ancient Germanic tribes, there was a very strong connection to the sea, because they used to trade, they used to raid, they used to fish for a living, for food. All these things were usually done by sea too, and they went so far as to go to Arabian countries, and there are stories of coming to the North Americas, Greenland, and all those different areas of the world, which were at some point in time settled by Germanic tribes. To us, water is a very important element to consider and to respect, I suppose. And I think it is for this reason that my initiation, partially for this reason, that my initiation into this rune was so lengthy, because it was literally the second longest initiation that I've had, with the exception of Wunyo, the rune of happiness and joy. And that is, again, like I said, I feel that that is a very symbolic thing, because me being a water sign, me being from a traditionally Germanic country, me being a Germanic soon-to-be rune master, 3 more runes to go, because of course with the uploading of this video, I am completing my initiation into Laguz, where I basically spread what I learned from my initiation to you guys, and then I will officially be moving on to the rune of Ingwas, which is already started, but I have been feeling that I really needed to make this video in order for the energies to fully unlock, as it were. And I've always felt this with the other runes, where it was just there is a blockage there, because at the beginning I of course said that I would be making these videos as a sacrifice to the runes in order to facilitate my initiation, and to make sure that for myself, I fully know what I am talking about. And if I cannot successfully complete a video, which has happened to me once, the initial recording that I did for Manas, which was the last rune, because I wanted to rush it a little bit, but I could really tell in the making of this video and the writing of this script that I did not have enough material, that I did not have enough, initiatory knowledge on that particular rune yet, so I had to re-record it, and that's the result that you guys saw. And I mean, this to get back onto this whole trading thing. I mean, the Netherlands, Holland, the country where I'm originally from, where I was born and raised, back in the 17th, 18th century, we used to have one of the world's most influential trading empires. We used to be, the VOC, the trading company that we had with, connections to Indonesia, where we settled, and which we basically just colonized, and where we took all these spices and herbs and all these things from, and which brought us a lot of wealth. And this was, of course, done by sea through the usage of ships. And this is a continuation of the ancient traditions, I feel, of the old Germanic tribes who used to also trade to distant lands, and who used to raid and conquer and settle in different areas of the world. So that is even a more recent example of a country in that area of the world that has done that, a country which I happen to be from. So I do feel that the element of water, again, because Njord is the god of wealth, and he is also the god of water, and traditionally how Njord has brought wealth is from overseas or through the sea, through the utilization of the sea as a trading canal, as a trading route, I suppose. Now, of course, nowadays we also have things such as planes and stuff like that, but I hope that the message is clear. Water is very strongly related to, and I did not originally really think about this when I went into this rune, because I thought, Fehu is wealth. Burkano means business and generation and planting seeds and wealth. But now I, of course, also understand that the seed that Burkano plants needs to be watered in order for it to grow into the tree of Fehu, because Fehu always, it may mean cattle, but Fehu really just means, to me, the way it looks, the way it appears, it looks like a tree with branches. And from those branches, fruits fall, which is rewards, riches, etc. That is how my psyche registers the rune of Fehu. And this actually leads me into a very interesting thing that I read about the other day. There is a book, I can't quite recall the author, but you may want to look it up. It is called the Futhark. So not the Futhark, but the Futhark. So that is without the F, without Fehu. It is called The Night Side of the Runes. Now, I firmly believe that my initiation always encompasses both the day side, or the light side, and the night side, and anything in between, and that's why my initiations are always filled with both positive and negative things. Usually they start off negative and then convert to positive. However, with Laguz, this was, in this case, the other way around. But we will again get on that later. But that book, Futhark, Night Side of the Runes, I was actually reading that, and the author, they discussed that basically they feel that Fehu is supposed to be the last rune, or that they have an argument at least for this. And I found this very interesting because if you think about it, Urus, it is the primal life force. It is the primal energy that resides within all of us. It is a sort of creative, raw, sexual energy that you can unleash. And then there is Furisas that comes after that, which is both chaos and also a protection against chaos. Chaos and order is a very integral part of human society, of course, our establishment of boundaries, rules, regulations, etc. And then all the other things happen. So, I actually fully understand where the offer comes from in that sense. And it actually did get me thinking, because Fehu, it is the very first rune in the Futhark. And I have seen both rewards and negative things happen with every rune that I have been initiated in, with the sole exception really of Fehu, in that sense. As in, Fehu means wealth, it means cattle. Now, it is interesting to me that when you look at the last rune row, especially the last half, the last rune row, Tiwas, it is courage, it is the inner will to do something, justice, do it with confidence, do it with prudence, make sure that you punish those that deserve to be punished, make sure that you stand up for yourself, and make sure that you do good unto the ones who deserve it. Then there's Burkano, it plants a seed, it is generation, it is the life cycle, it is maiden mother crone. Now, of course, as a man, I am not subject to that, threefold trinity of stages, but I of course understand that even for women it is more of a symbolism than it is an actual, phase as such, taken in such a literal sense. However, it is a seed that is planted. It is a seed that is planted, and then you have the interconnectivity between people, Awas, and Manas, the knowing of the self, knowing who you are to become. And then this rune, Laguz, is meant to water the seed that Burkano has planted. And I feel that Manas is almost a sort of like foreshadowing of what this tree is meant to become. And then eventually you have Ingwas, which is self-actualization, your ascent to divinity, or rather your rediscovery of it. And Laguz, being the healing rune that it is, I have noticed, I feel very strongly I have completed my initiation into it, but not every issue that I have has been remedied. Now, the reason for that is because Ingwas is self-actualization, so the problems that still remain are problems that come from within me. In other words, Ingwas is likely going to be the rune responsible for these final stripping away of all the internal issues that I have, the internal blockages. And then the self-actualization happens in a giant, massive, orgasmic explosion, if you will, because Ingwas is, of course, also a rune of orgasm, of the male orgasm specifically. However, that's not to say that the rune does not apply in many other aspects to women, because Laguz, the rune we are discussing today, is a very feminine rune, and so is Verkano, which is a rune I have also mentioned, of course, very thoroughly today already in relation to this. So after that, you get Ophila, in my opinion, because some people say that, Dagas is not the last rune. I personally am very strongly of the opinion that Dagas is the last rune in the Futhark. And my reasons for that I will explain in a second. I have explained this in several of my videos, but just to reiterate, in case some of you are either watching this for the first time, or in case that you are maybe in need of a little bit of a brushing up on why I think that. But Ophila, it is the estate, it is the inheritance. It is not just the inheritance in a literal sense, it is also inheritance of the ancestral connection, your DNA, your the things you inherited as a result of your genetic makeup. But also on a spiritual level, your spiritual inheritance, which for me is, of course, the Germanic pagan traditions. Now, of course, I also had an inheritance due to the recent association of Europe with Christianity. Now, I have done away with it. I have rejected that part because I find Christianity a very toxic religion, just like Islam and just like Judaism, because they all essentially revolve around the same thing, which is oppression and repression, and the subjugation of human potential and divinity to a God who wishes to contain and restrain us, because frankly I feel he is afraid of us. But there is a very strong connection to the ancestral spiritual connection as well. However, the thing that I am wanting to get more into, because we were talking about the Futhark and the night side of the runes and Fehu, and this is what I am going to be getting at, of course. Ophila is the estate. It is the building of a castle or an estate, a manor, a home front, a home base, the settling down, the putting down of roots. And keep in mind, the ancients were a very migratory people. They called the Dark Ages officially the migration period. The migration period, in the time when the Elder Futhark was a relevant thing in the minds of the tribes that used it. And I mean to say by that, of course, to me, it's still a very relevant thing, and it has been seeing a very strong resurgence, which I'm very happy with as a soon-to-be rune master of the Elder Futhark, of course. But back in the day, it was used as a magical system and secondarily as a writing system, of course. So you have this importance that is placed on moving around, on putting your roots down. So I come from a different country. I am from the Netherlands. I currently live in the United States. And to me, it represents somehow the development of wealth, the development of, how to put this, the establishing of roots, the planting of roots, and of course its association with marriage, the association with basically starting a family, of creating your own ancestral line by you having children, and your children eventually down the line having children. That is, of course, also something that is related to it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if Ophila is the symbolism for that, if Ophila is the start for that, and Dagas is the transformation and the eternal cycle, then perhaps Fehu is merely the end reward that some of us may receive, because I would not exactly say that currently I am a wealthy individual for various reasons. So, in terms of money, that is. So, I mean, it is very interesting to me because I did not see in that sense a quote-unquote reward from Fehu like I did with most other runes that I have been initiated in. In fact, I would argue all other runes that I have been initiated in. So, That is a very interesting, hopeful perspective to me, and I do feel that this book might be worth looking into for some of you, because I do also feel that, and that was partially the point why what I was trying to make earlier by saying that I feel that Dagas is the last rune to me, and some people may consider Ophila to be the last rune for them. Um, I do feel that there is a certain kind of flexibility in the way that the Futhark or the Uthark or the universal energies behind these symbols, that they initiate the magician, shaman, witch, whatever in. And it is actually becoming a bit of interest to me that perhaps this Uthark, this night side of the runes, as they call it, is in some way, shape, or form actually applicable to me, because I am not a white light, rainbows, and unicorns individual. I very much am not. I have made several times a declaration that I am, in fact, a warrior shaman, because I, engage in spiritual warfare and help further uh, the plans of the gods, if you will, in that sense as well, in a spiritual perspective. And ironically, the reason I came to this path was because the servants, or I should say perhaps slaves of another deity, who at one time pretended to be my friends and helpers, were the ones who repressed me or tried to repress and subdue me through their own magic by leading me astray with false rituals, lies, and behind the scenes doing all sorts of fucked up shit on me. Now, it is ironically those very same people that sought to subdue me who have ultimately caused me walking this path in order to facilitate what I am currently doing. So, that is perhaps a very interesting thing that Laguz has also shown me. It has stripped away, as Laguz being the water rune, the rune of, well, torrents and tsunamis, and not just of cleansing, happy lakes and streams does. It is a very violent rune in some respects. It is a very violent rune in many ways. So, because I mean, water can be very frightening and powerful. It can be one of the most destructive forces on this planet, of course. So, I mean, if you've ever seen footage of a tsunami, it's horrible what it can do. So, as I said, Laguz is the rune of water, of the very oceans itself. This includes both its creative, sustaining, and its destructive elements. And here we, of course, see a sort of triad embodied in Laguz. It is a creative force, it is a sustaining force, and it is then also a destructive force. If you are at all familiar with Hinduism, you would know that Brahma, the creator, and then Vishnu is the sustainer, and then Shiva is, of course, the destroyer. Now, all of these things, all of these elements I have endured through my runic initiation into this particular rune, which took, as I said, a good 7-8 months, because I think I started the initiation right before the new year started of 2019. I think I started it like very late December 2018 after my upload into Manas. So, yeah, it was a very intense initiation. That only Wunyo took me longer. And Wunyo was when I was basically moving from Washington State to where I currently live, which is Arizona. And yeah, so it was a very intense, very powerful initiation. One that ended on a negative note, but now that I have meditated a little bit on the rune of Ingwaz, I do feel that that is necessary. And the reason for that is because Laguz is supposed to lay bare what is still a problem. It is supposed to heal some things. It is supposed to cleanse some things. It is supposed to completely destroy and wash away some other things. And then at the same time, it is supposed to leave you with things yet to fix. And those will be the things that come from within. Meaning to say that Ingwaz, the next rune, is very strongly tied with Laguz, stronger than I originally suspected. Because if you read sites where they have these these summaries of the runes, and you read the rune of Laguz, and you read the rune of Ingwaz. They seem very segregated almost. Okay, and that is not my experience. It is very strongly my experience that Ingwaz is the healing of the divine internal self, the damage that has been done to you as a person, to your ego, to your I, to your spiritual self, and even perhaps on a soul level. Because I would like to tell you a little bit of a story, and now this happened during my initiation into Tiwaz, actually. Um, one of these people that I talked about earlier, one of these people who pretended to be my friends, my mentors, my helpers, my teachers, for lack of a better word. Um, one of them basically sicked a deity on me, a deity that was associated with water. All right. And this deity initially pretended to be my friend, and this deity was from a very different pantheon, one that I had never worked with. But I have had an interest in for quite a while, and I can unfortunately at this time not tell you why or how or what, because there's several reasons that I cannot do that. And well, I obviously can't tell you about it, so I can't explain to you why that is. But basically, the thing is, this goddess pretended to be my friend, tried to infiltrate my little army, I guess, my little spiritual army that I got here, my little operation, my little setup, I suppose, that I got going on. And I used the word little ironically here. Uh, but I mean, I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that I have the biggest, most powerful spiritual army, because I don't. But it is solid, decent, well organized at the very least. So it is. But basically, this deity, this goddess, she decided to try to befriend me, knowing that I, of course, had an interest. She approached me, and on the behalf of this particular individual, this other shaman that was working for another deity who was of that particular pantheon, or who I strongly suspect is a deity of that different pantheon under a different name. Um, but basically, this individual, this deity, what she did was eventually, the moment that I found out because of something stupid that the shaman in question posted on their social media, which made me connect the dots, because it was a very passive aggressive, as they sometimes do in their stupidity, which I have no problem with, because that gives away secrets and moves, and I'm very glad that they do that, because then I can prepare for it, and then I can counteract it. So this being uh, suddenly turns around. She was a water deity, by the way, or a deity strongly associated with water. And she turns around and she starts attacking me in my dreams, attacking me in, every time I try to take a bath. And she tried to eventually place a spell in me. Now, of course, what is a human shaman going to do against a deity like that? Well, fortunately, I have my own pantheon of deities with whom I have a good reputation. So I obviously called on them, asked them to remove it, which they did for free. No costs, no charges extra, which I was very grateful for. And basically, yeah, things went for the better. However, what it did do is it triggered some sort of past life fear, because apparently in the 11th century I had a life as a sort of like a trader. I think I was a Scandinavian man in that life who was a trader. And that's why I feel that this is relevant for this particular rune. And apparently, that incarnation, he drowned at sea, and that is where I also had an instinctive fear of water, which is funny because I find water at the same time very soothing. But on the other hand, even when I was a very young kid, like I'm talking like real young, and I barely remember this, but my parents told me that I used to scream bloody murder when people tried to shower me, when people tried to bathe me. And basically, it came to light, therefore, back then, and I didn't really think about it anymore after the situation resolved itself and after this particular deity backed down, after I installed protections, made contracts, and extra barriers and wards and stuff like that. And basically, it revealed to me that there is also a need for healing for past life issues in that sense, because there are certain phobias and traumas that people may have that they cannot explain in some way, shape, or form, but they could very easily be explained by dying in a past life under certain conditions. For example, if you got bitten by a spider and you died in a past life, you may be afraid of spiders. If the spider in question is, of course, poisonous or venomous or something like that. Um, well, poisonous, I should say. It's not venomous, poisonous. So, because there's a difference. But, for example, if you are afraid of water, you probably drowned in a past life. And if you can't explain why you're afraid of water in this life, because like I said, I had it from a very young age, there should have been no logical reason for me to be afraid of water. I mean, nowadays I love sitting in baths and taking showers and stuff like that. So, but as a child, I had this very innate fear, and this goddess tried to utilize this by making me once again relive these things. And that is a very interesting thing. That in so doing, I know she meant to attack me because there was clear hostility behind it and the stalking of my dreams and stuff like that. However, uh, in so doing, and this is why I love the runes, they manipulate even your enemies to make moves, to do stupid shit. So even the deities are apparently subject to this. And that is crazy to say. Maybe it sounds almost arrogant, but it's really just the truth. And from what I can tell, from what I've seen, even deities are subject to being manipulated by these forces, and that is very, very impressive. And being able to utilize these powers, being able to harness these powers after I am done with my initiation, I can't wait, you know. So that is great. I mean, I obviously already cast magic. I already use runes in my magic most of the time, but well, I have a feeling that that moment that I finish my initiation into Dagas, it's gonna unlock something that is transformative. Like the rune says, it's gonna be a new dawn, a new era almost. So um, I am actually very, very excited to the point where I'm sitting here like I can almost not wait to get these initiations over with. But of course, I understand and know that I have to be patient. But yeah, so hopefully you get what I'm saying here. It's a very exciting but very turbulent time that I find myself in right now. To get back on that healing from past lives and Laguz being a healing rune, which is what I'm currently going to discuss with you, or have been discussing with you. Not just has it laid bare past life things, it has laid bare spiritual issues that I will be talking to you about later on. As a shaman, as someone who walks a shamanic path, shamans are often called the wounded healers. And it is coming to light to me that there has been a very sincere, significant spiritual wound in the form of me basically partially sharing my energy with a foreign entity. Some would call this, I suppose, oppression or partial possession. And indeed, I have been possessed in the past. Indeed, I have been partially possessed in the past. And it is not pleasant. Now, I understand that there are demonolators who basically, worship demons and who willfully let themselves get possessed by such entities. And I also understand that in my own line of work, channeling and trances often, result in channeling of spirits and relaying messages in that sense. However, this was not a willful, voluntary, temporary possession. This is something that has gone on for 1,000 years. Now, I will get on that later, but there is a significant spiritual wound which has basically been the main focus of my shamanic illness. Because I basically was diagnosed with OCD, with obsessive compulsive disorder, in the sense of pure intrusive thoughts. And basically, what that means is that for the longest time, the moment that I turned 18, and sporadically before then, here and there, I started having thoughts that were just not my own. And of course, secular science, and as a psychologist in training, you would obviously say, well, it's just a neurochemical imbalance. It is just imbalance between your chemicals, and maybe in some cases damage to your brain. And certainly this is part of it. This is the physical manifestation of it. However, as a spiritual healer, I would say that that chemical imbalance is caused by something, unless that damage was caused through physical means. There is oftentimes a spiritual component, because the shamanic principle dictates that everything, or in my personal opinion, most things that start in the spiritual trickle down into the physical, and vice versa, of course, because everything is connected. So it was very interesting to me to find these things out over the past few months, past several months, I should say. And again, I will be getting on that later. But there is, as you can see, several different areas, as you can hopefully see, several different areas that were already pointed out by this rune, or at least things that were perhaps pointed out earlier that were now brought to my attention again, and that's something that may be, subject to healing as well. Now, of course, I found it very interesting that this rune deals with drowning and water and fears and healing and all that stuff. And that my past life, of course, had a death as a result of drowning in the 11th century. Now, there are, of course, also other things. There was a familiar curse, which I will be talking about in a second. I would like to mention something here. Many people think that a shaman is some sort of divinely chosen being. And I guess that in some way, shape, or form this may be sort of true, but it is more my experience that a shaman is a wounded healer who, for some reason, some way, shape, or form, has an open spirit who got damaged in some way, shape, or form, and a shaman is then on the quest to heal that imbalance, that wound, that damage. And it is this quest and the overcoming of these insurmountable or seemingly unsurmountable odds, and the healing of the what is supposed to be the unhealable, that makes someone a full, complete shaman. And that is why I think that the runes are guiding me through these steps and stripping away all these layers in stages, because it is being brought to my attention that the ultimate core is the spirit that was residing with me. Now, depending, of course, on the time, on the place, on the path you walk, the deities you work with, the spiritual tradition you're being initiated into, uh, and the spirit that is in question, that is bothering you, uh, this can be a very violent process, and this can be a mentally violent process and a spiritually violent process, how it can even be a physically violent process. It is like Laguz, it is a very tumultuous, dichotomous path that you're walking. On one hand, you're trying to heal, you're trying to bring peace, you're trying to bring self-love back into the picture. You're trying to spread good, positive, happy energy to people around you. But on the other hand, there is also this internal struggle against, actually, let me rephrase that. There is no struggle. There is a fight against this being, against this individual that you have two choices basically with. You either let them win, and then you fail to be a shaman, because that is as simple as that. The moment that you subjugate yourself to a spirit like that, the moment that you give in to your shamanic illness, the moment that you are weak enough to say, okay, you win, you are basically a failed shaman and you go insane. That is usually how it goes. In other words, being a shaman is a pretty fucking dangerous thing. But on the other hand, if you come out on top, you will have developed magical, spiritual capabilities that very few people on this planet will eventually have dreamt of. Now, of course, the fact that I am still with this spirit, or this spirit is still with me, I should say, because this is my body, this is my being. She has no right to be here because, yes, it is a woman, and this spirit was at one time a lover of mine 1,000 years ago, or at least pretended to be, but again, I will get on that later. This can result in a very dichotomous, very violent path, but at the same time it is also interconnected and very strongly interwoven. So, it is not going to stop. That this torment, um, this torture in whatever form you as a person, as an individual, and however that spirit is able to do this to you, um, it will not stop until you either end it in a positive way, as in you kick or cast a spirit out, or you die, even by killing yourself perhaps, because you can't take it anymore. And then it continues into your next lives. So the funny thing is here, of course, the way I see it, carry the fight on to the bitter end, their bitter end, not yours. Because if you don't, it's just going to repeat itself over and over and over, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So once you are in this pattern, you will always be a shaman to be. And if you keep failing, this process is going to continue on endlessly. Now, of course, a spirit who is capable of doing this kind of thing, and a spirit who is so integrated into someone, of course, has to have some sort of pull and weight in the spirit world. That is to say, a spirit like that is no small feat to overcome. Now, I am pretty proud to say that I am actually absolutely on the winning side here. So that is a good thing for me, and that is also why I look so forward to Ingwas, because it is self-actualization, which also means that internal blockages, likely including this woman, will be removed. And even if she is not immediately removed, it will dislodge her in such a sense that this will bring about a very strong opportunity for me to kick her out and maybe even have her bound. Because my ultimate goal is not to just kick her out and let her run around. No, because this individual has caused me so much torment, I am not going to just let them run around. I am going to capture them, and I am going to find ways to deal with them, shall we say. But I will not divulge too much information on that. However, as I have stated before, it is not the case that you as a human being are weaker than spirits. It is just not the case. Why? Because you are a spirit. You are just a spirit in a body. So a disembodied spirit has actually certain disadvantages to you. Yes, they are able to move around more freely. Yes, they have a perspective that is more clear, that is more high, in the sense that they can see more and that they are less bound by the physical focal point that is your physical body. However, you also are much more grounded. Your reality is much more firm. It is much harder to alter. So there are disadvantages and advantages that at the end of the day balance each other out. And a lot of the time, when a spirit is disintegrated into you, they will likely be stealing a part of your power to torment you. And this has been a very significant theme in this rune, in uncovering these hidden layers. Because you see what this individual has done, and I think now is the time to actually tell my story. So it seems that about 1,000 years ago, a little over 1,000 years ago, I was a person of import that was working for a deity that I do not very well like. And I eventually came into magic through a spellbook that I acquired. And basically what happened is that through the usage of this spellbook, I conjured a being that promised that incarnation power, influence, etc. And this individual, this woman, this female spirit, who basically was sent there to infiltrate, because their actual goal was not to be my spouse, which is what she requested in that life. Her goal was to infiltrate and to keep me restrained, because I have practiced magic throughout lifetimes for millennia, apparently. Now, of course, I have no concrete way of proving this, but that is what my contracts in the astral that I have, in the astral realms that I have quite clearly shown me. My earliest contract is from about 1800 something BC. That is a contract with the being known as Malak or Moloch. Now, of course, everybody who hears that name is going, Moloch, child sacrifice. Yeah, actually, the contract had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that I was a warrior, a soldier in that life, and that on the field of battle, I did certain things on behalf of Moloch. I conquered as a leader of a particular band of soldiers, I suppose. I conquered certain places for him, and that's how I got rewarded with spiritual affluence and influence, I suppose. Regardless, back to the life in question. So this being, she pretended to be my lover, pretended to like me. Eventually, I died, and I was initiated into the higher mysteries, quote unquote, of this particular deity that she works for. Now, 1,000 years later, I am still stuck with this bitch. Because, and I mean, no disrespect to women in general here, but please understand my frustration because I have now realized that this individual has been harassing me for the past 1,000 years. As you can hopefully imagine, do not take too kindly to someone like this, and I'm sure you wouldn't either if they were constantly chattering in your, into your energy and doing all sorts of messed up shit with you or to you. And by the way, this is not the same entity that I am discussing in my sexual spirits video. And this is, I mentioned 2 succubi there. Both of them are not the same as this one. This one has kept herself hidden in the background as the puppeteer, basically, of the whole repression, oppression, possession cycle, basically. So, it has come to my attention that basically in about the 1800s, I had a lifetime where I was harassed by this woman. I was a fine, upstanding British gentleman, I believe, in that life. And I mean, gentleman as in the literal sense. I was a gentleman, as in a higher class individual, I believe, who in some way, shape, or form did do magic, and what he basically ended up doing with a group of people was sort of exorcise her. Now, this had both positive and negative consequences. The positive consequences were as simple as the influence that she once had was not as great anymore. However, a portion of her energetic body and links remained. In other words, the exorcism was not done well. As most exorcism as done by the Catholic Church isn't. And I will, as I have said, make a separate video on this particular topic. The exorcism was not performed well, and it has left basically damage in my energy, in my spiritual field, that allowed her to partially, with certain anchors, remain. And through these anchors, she was able to travel around, but she was still able to influence me. So if she was actually still attached to me, in this life I would have already have made short work of her. However, because I have had a situation like that before several times, one of them in which I discussed with Olgus, which was a familiar given to me by Lord Agaris, who had gone a little haywire, although I now strongly suspect that that familiar was not originally like this, and that this individual was responsible for corrupting him. So, maybe I was unintentionally, without my knowing. I'm not going to feel bad about that because I had no way of knowing it, because these things happen in layers, unfortunately. But yeah, so this situation, it turned out to be much more complicated than I had originally thought. And basically, right now, I am working on, quote unquote, separating myself from her, which requires, of course, self-actualization. But this rune has swept away all opposition and laid bare the actual ties, the actual issues that facilitated my shamanic illness. So let me explain to you briefly how this works. This individual is partially still in my energy, but not to such an extent that she cannot travel around. So when I told you earlier that I have obsessive compulsive disorder, unwanted thoughts, and this is something that I have discussed with some viewers on my channel here, actually, where they said that when they abandoned Christianity, that they had less OCD, or that their OCD entirely vanished. And thank you for that conversation. You will know who you are. But it was very interesting to me because when I denounced myself from Christianity, when I removed my baptisms from past lives and this life and all sorts of devotions, because at one time I was was a very high up individual in the Catholic Church. And my OCD did indeed become significantly less as a result, but it never did entirely go away like that individual claimed. Now, it is understood by me that this individual, because of course the deity that she works for is Yahweh, so this individual has also continued to torment me, but she was the only one that has until this point not been found out. So my OCD was therefore not removed as a result of this individual still being there. So when I say I have OCD and I have a purely obsessive form of it, meaning that I have unwanted thoughts and not so much rituals that I do in order to combat those thoughts, this is evidently the spiritual cause for this, because the reason I have thoughts that seem like they are not my own is because there is indeed a spirit that is making me think thoughts, or that I am picking thoughts up from that are indeed not mine. Because if you understand how energy works, if you understand how black magic works, if you want to get somebody to do something for you, what do? You go to them when they are asleep, or you perform a spell when they are asleep, and you start influencing their subconscious mind, because that's when most of their defenses are down. So you perform that spell on their psyche, and you will implant a seed that will snowball into effect until finally what you want happens. So, in other words, energy travels and is able to influence. And I have a very powerful, very strong magical shields and wardings built up over millennia. However, because she has still energetic ties into me, she is able to bypass all those shields, because those ties are there. She can access them whenever she wishes. So that means that all my shields and protections are currently, at present still, but not for much longer, kind of still useless. So, not entirely, but most of it is not of help to this individual. However, it is, of course, my ultimate goal to remove her, and thus, hopefully, because there will be no foreign energy in my energy field anymore, be rid of my obsessive-compulsive disorder, because the OCD was the very reason that I started out in magic in the first place. It has been my dream to remedy that. About 11 years have passed since I started first actively having manifestations of the obsessive-compulsive disorder. And yeah, it's been a very long, hard ride, but I do feel that I am actually making very strong progress that I have never been able to make through secular science. Because as you may know, OCD is not something that is recognized as being a curable condition by secular sciences at this point. Now, of course, I have to always add a disclaimer here. If you are suffering from such things, such issues, I do very strongly recommend that if you have issues like that, do go see a secular therapist or other healthcare professional. Why? Because even if you do believe in magic like I do, if you do believe in the spiritual realm, and even if you do that they can influence you, it is still, of course, very important that you get a form of therapy so that you can, at least while you are dealing with it, receive the tools to handle it. Because it is very important that you do not lose your shit while you're doing this. Because I have seen that the moment that I start actively engaging against these spirits, or engaging these spirits in the sense of a conflict, that things, they start pushing it more. I have noticed that. It is basically a spiritual war that you are fighting against such a being that is tormenting you. Now, of course, this knowledge is as old as pretty much time itself, as long as there have been shamans, as long as there have been humans to record the existence of shamans. So, now, of course, I already knew this from the moment that basically my initiation started. However, it is finding the right spirit and the ones that are the most hidden. I actually had a very powerful guide of mine come to me in my very early days, who literally gave me a message, and he said to me, "Look to the watchers and beware the hidden ones." Now, of course, I had no idea what he meant by that. Now, what I understand now is that the hidden ones, he was quite literal with that, and he just was basically saying, look to the spirits that you don't know are there. So, in other words, go find out any spirits who may be hiding behind the curtain, because that is the ones who are actually responsible. and look to the Watchers. When I first started my initiation, my Christian influences were still quite strong. Now, I am still not entirely sure what he meant by look to the Watchers. Now, of course, there are the Grigori Watchers, and the Grigori Watchers are, of course, the quote-unquote fallen angels of Yahweh, who came to the earth and then had sex with humans and then created Nephilim in the process. Now, I have since come to realize that Yahweh is, of course, the bad guy here, and that basically those angels who rebelled were actually the ones who were honoring their more natural drives, I suppose, and that they were more the ones who decided that the regime of Yahweh, strict as it is just not worth working under. And perhaps it has something to do with that. I don't quite know. However, that is neither here nor there. I just thought it was an interesting little tidbit to add on top of that, because this was, of course, years ago, and it still now is, for some, in some ways, relevant. So, what does all this have to do with Laguz? Again, everything. Laguz is a rune of healing, of psychic intuition, of the ebbing, of the flowing of the tides, in a literal and even in a figurative sense. Laguz is the torrent that can drown someone, and Laguz is also at the same time the pleasant lake in which we can swim for recreation. Laguz is also the deep, dark, claustrophobic bottom of the ocean where no sun will ever reach. And it is also the gentle streams of water that nurture the plants and livestock through which we sustain ourselves and through which the earth blossoms and turns into something beautiful. So, in other words, what Laguz teaches us is that through violence and through destruction, sometimes these things are necessary. And from that destruction, as the old is swept away by a tsunami, something new and better can take its place. So even as you're going through all this shit, as you're going through all these initiations, after you go through all this pain, all this hurt, and for years you don't seem to have any sort of respite, any rest, because that is at the point really where I have been now, and it is my understanding that Ingwaz starts out like that, because Ingwaz is the conservation of energy and then is released in a massive explosion to facilitate a desired outcome. But before then, there is a feeling of drudgery, of going on and on and on and dragging on, of not seeing that many results, of needing to persevere. And if you persevere, you'll see the positive outcomes. And that is also why I said earlier that Laguz and Ingwaz are very strongly interconnected with each other, even though at first glance they may not seem to be. So Laguz, therefore, impacts our finances, it impacts our emotional state, it impacts our psychic gifts, our intuition, the knowing of the unknowable. It is the, change for what seems to be ill, but ultimately perhaps for good. Hopefully for good, depending on how you handle it, depending on how things develop, of course. It represents, much like Furisas, really, an interplay between chaos and order around us. Because water is violent, but at the same time there is an order to its violence. And much like Furisas, it also represents a protection against chaos, but unlike Furisas, it is not a protection in the form of something like Thor, who fights the giants with Mjolnir to hold them off, to protect Asgard, to protect Midgard. However, it represents more the calm flow of a peaceful lake in such violent resilience rather than outward exertion of force in some such scenarios. And what I mean by that is that when everything around you is a raging tide, when a tsunami is blowing around you, there is a place within yourself where you can sit, where you can center yourself, where you can center your energy, and where you can collect your thoughts, and where you can think to yourself, everything is all right. And that may seem like wishful thinking. No, that is not wishful thinking, that is part of manifestation. It is remaining calm and collected and manifesting a positive outcome, drawing those positive energies to you. So it is an inner peace and calm which is to be tapped into, as the world around you is basically being swept away by that tsunami. So Laguz represents inner resilience, like water, rather than outward exertion of a force that in some such scenarios basically could be seen as an exertion of your power over your external reality. Laguz is more about going with the flow in that sense, more about riding the waves, rather than building a massive fucking dam to stop the waves. On the other hand, Laguz is also the tsunami that is raging around you itself. It is a sour of chaos, of discontent, of discord in its reverse position, most likely. Laguz represents, madness. It also represents a healthy and flexible and healing mind. And this is also something that I have found with OCD, with the obsessive compulsive disorder. I mean, I have managed to make this situation better for myself through the utilization of magic, to be able to cope with it, to be able to handle it more easily, to know where it finally comes from, to know that there is indeed a remedy and an end in sight. And I look very much forward to this. It has also clearly shown me that at times this madness, these feelings of being not in control of myself during the times when I was younger, when I felt like I was overtaken by something foreign, which was the case, and that was not a very pleasant thing, of course. But these maddening worries and obsessions and anxieties that I had in my earlier adult years, they felt like I wasn't myself. They felt like it wasn't me. They felt like somebody was trying to sweep away my happiness. They felt like somebody was trying to destroy me from the inside out. And sure enough, there was. Because this being wasn't here because she, as she claims, and she tried to pull that card on me in this life again as well. Now, of course, in my defense, I already am with another succubus, which was fortunately a very strong protection against the wiles and tricks of this wretched being. So that was a very, very big chapter of my life that I feel is coming to a close as I am finding answers, as I am unraveling all the filth and taint and corruption that this individual has put me through, and the disgusting machinations of a God that frankly just hates humans, because I feel Yahweh just hates us. And he's quite open about it in his book. He's quite open about the fact that he hates humans. Except with a very select few, like David, who was a rapist, a murderer, and who was a very gross man. And of course, various other individuals like Eliah or Eliza or whatever his name is, where he summons a pack of bears to rip apart children because they kept calling him Baldhead. These are the kinds of people that Yahweh likes. So, in other words, Yahweh is, of course, an evil deity, and if you guys are wondering why I don't ever let this go, it is because I have had a very intimate first-hand experience of his hatred for humanity. And as a shaman, I feel it is my duty to bring that kind of stuff as an animist priest, as a pagan priest. I feel it is my duty to bring that to the forefront, because our gods do not hate us. Our gods, yes, they are open and honest about the fact that they do want something out of us, absolutely. However, they also expect us to develop ourselves, and they are here to help us, to empower ourselves, to make us like them, because many of them were, at some times, us. So, I find in my spiritual workings on myself, on others, and even by talking to individuals, like I said earlier, on this very channel, in the comment section, that, the healing and the maddening aspects of Laguz are very literal. And And I feel that this particular topic, this particular rune, has played a very significant portion in my own shamanic initiation into the healing or the process of healing the shamanic illness which I am dealing with, my shamanic illness, my initiatory illness, whatever you want to call it. And it sometimes just brings with it a force that is necessary to, as many black magicians especially will know, that it is a tide that just sweeps things away to destroy it, to completely eradicate certain things in your life, to make sure that the way is opened for something new and better to bloom. And that is, I think, the principle, of course, behind the flooding of, for example, the Nile River, where it happens, and then it's a violent flooding, of course. And if you're not careful, it can catch you in the stream and perhaps carry you away and kill you. But if you are careful, if you can somehow contain it, which is, of course, part of what magic is, it is about being able to control energy, about situations, controlling what is necessary to come out on top, to have things go according to plan, then new, better things will rise in its place. So in short, Laguz, like water, it represents fluidity, it represents adaptation. As Sun Tzu, the author of the military treatise, The Art of War, said, water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. And I have felt this maxim to be a very, very strong guiding principle in the energies of Laguz and my initiation into it, because I consider myself a spiritual warrior. I consider myself a fighter. I'm a very stubborn individual. I feel like I would have, had I not been that way, literally been driven crazy by this individual. But I am not driven crazy. In fact, I am winning, and I am removing and extracting her, just like I have removed and extracted and found the way to do it with all these other entities and spirits. Now, of course, she is the most deeply integrated one. She has been here for 1,000 years. And she is also the only remaining unwanted one, because the contract that I have with Malak, with Moloch, I have no problem with it. Yahweh tells us in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that Malak is a king of shame, that he is a disgusting, evil being. It is my understanding that he is a bit of a grumpy, perhaps violent being, and this is befitting of a deity, I suppose, who works with soldiers, who works with warriors. And the same could be said for Thor, the same could be said for Odin, the same could be said for Morgan, all three deities with whom I work pretty intimately. So I do not feel that that in and of itself has been a negative thing. In fact, the contract of Moloch has been the only one, as I said, that I have kept around. And I had to make a lot of sacrifices for that contract. I will not tell you what exactly was in it, but it was such a rather big sacrifice that I could not, even if I wanted to, replicate it in the modern world. But it had nothing to do with human sacrifice in the sense of like putting children to the fire or something like that. Yes, it had to do with war. Yes, it had to do with weaponry. Yes, it had to do with stuff like that. However, I am not a physical warrior in this life. I am aware of that. Nothing more scummy than stolen valor, so let me put that out there. But yeah, no, I do consider myself in the spiritual a warrior who lives by maxims like this. And I think that an adaptation of such a mentality is required if you wish to embrace the energies of Laguz, if you wish to be able to adapt, if you wish to be able to go with the flow, to be fluid, to bend like a reed and be sturdy as an oak, as they say. So it is something that is imperative if you wish to make it past this rune. Because I very strongly feel that this rune has the capacity, so far into the Futhark as it is, to make or break an initiate. And I am glad to say that it did not break me, even though I came out of it, I will not lie, a bit reeling from the shit that happened. And that shit I will get into a bit further in a moment. And if you are wondering, ladies and gentlemen, why this is a one-on-one runic divination video, that is the title that I started it out as. It has, of course, since I started this series, transformed into so much more. Rest assured, we will eventually come to the divination part. If that's what you're here for, no worries. As I said, Laguz represents the natural ups and downs of life, the ebbing and flowing of tides. And I've seen this in my own life, especially in terms of finances. Um, so it was really funny because, as I said earlier in the video, I made a contract for finances with Njord, deity of my own pantheon, of course, who presides over wealth, trade, and over this rune. But the thing is with Laguz, if you want to be fully initiated into both the positive and the negative sides of it, which I have done from the beginning standard, because I wanted to master the runes, that's why I want to achieve the title of Rune Master. You cannot be a master of the runes unless you experience their full effects. So it is quite interesting to me that when I made that contract, and this is not Njord's fault, let me outline this. Njord, even though he presides over this rune along with Nerfus, even though he is associated with it, even though it is his element of water, Njord is still subject to the initiatory process that the initiate goes through. As I said, even gods are manipulated by the runes to do stupid shit that are to my benefit so that I more fully go through these initiations. And I suppose if one is so inclined, if one is so willing to believe that the gods are indeed all wise and all powerful, which I absolutely don't believe, you could say that some gods are willing to play the bad guy just to get you on board. However, I do not feel that. I genuinely felt malice from this particular goddess. So, regardless of what you believe, I also have to ask, does it matter? To me, the ends justify the means. That is a practical mindset that I very much appreciate about myself and that I appreciate in others. Of course, I have my morals, my ethics, and there are certain things that I absolutely just won't do. But overall, I am of the opinion, of course, that, if you want something done, you got to do it. So, basically, this finance contract with Njord, um, he promised me wealth, he promised me protection against things that would impact my wealth, etc. Now, of course, this was the case and will be the case now that I am fortunately done with Laguz. However, my initiation into the runes overrides everything, including contracts made with deities, because it is my main initiatory method into my spiritual path, of course. Nothing that I do will go beyond that. And again, even if gods are manipulated by these runes, by these symbols, if people, other shamans, other practitioners are literally led to do stupid shit to my benefit, then what are you going to do about it? So I had not really thought about that until a couple months ago. I believe it was 2 months ago, where I suddenly received a massive influx of money. I was, of course, very happy. I thought to myself, hey, look, it's Njord at work. Wonderful. Awesome. I'm bringing in candles and incense left and right. And I'm happy, and I'm thinking, hey, shit's looking up. You see, my magic works. The gods do honor their bargains and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, a month later, the air conditioning breaks in my house. And I live in Arizona, in the Sonoran Desert. So if I seem like I am sweating profusely, it is because I'm sweating profusely. So, yeah. I basically, my air conditioning broke in this house, and a lot of shit basically started happening that was crazy. Just electronics breaking left and right. The modem broke. The router modem combo, I should say, broke. We had to invest money in that. We still haven't gotten the AC fixed. It was about $1,400 in one go, and we didn't have that laying around. So, the thing is, initially one could perhaps think, oh, see, New York backstabbed you, or maybe they're not trustworthy, or stuff like that. But no, that's not what it is about. Laguz is about exposing things as well. as about providing a tsunami to sweep away certain things. It is also about healing, about cleansing. It is also about bringing you money, because Njord brings wealth through shores. However, because I was going through the initiation of Laguz, I had to experience both sides of it. That is both the tsunami and the positive. Now, here's the kicker. I had known for years, since I was younger, that my mother had told me that her side of the family, who used to be nobility, rulers of a pretty decently sized city in my home country, the Netherlands, a couple hundred years ago, I think it was in the 1800s, there used to be nobility over that city. They used to preside over it, I believe, or at least hold a fief or like some sort of other however that went at the time, or they just had possessions. They were an affluent family, suffice to say. They have called themselves nobility, so I'm going to assume that that is correct. I have no way of knowing that, of course, accurately, but I do know that my grandma used to own, when I was a young kid, at least a portion of the mansion that used to entirely belong to the family. She basically had rented out and sold portions of it, I believe, to different people. So basically, she lived in a section of it, and neighbors lived in other sections of it. So regardless, this family, my mom, they started out as apparently nobles, until about a group of 100 people, probably their subjects, decided to curse my mom's bloodline. And this was in the 1800s again. Now, like I said, 100 people apparently partook in it. And this is apparently in my mom's family book, like their history. And it basically said everything a name of family does will not succeed. So, this curse, made by 100 people, probably led by, I believe, one or two individuals, a male and a female. I have encountered them in Astral, and was not very friendly to them, as you can hopefully imagine. So, I am not technically, on paper, a member of that family. I do not carry the name of my mom's family. My parents are divorced, but I carry my dad's name. I decided to keep it that way, even though for the longest time, due to the machinations of my mother and lies of things that she came out with, just believed that my mother was the party that was in the right here, and that my father was an evil, cheating scumbag. The truth, as I learned later, was much, much more complicated. However, suffice to say, I no longer talk to my mother. I only talk to my father nowadays. So, regardless, I carry my father's name, not my mom's name. So for a time, I thought that I would be immune to this curse. This was not to be the case, because I carry her bloodline in me. I carry her blood, her genetics, her DNA. So this familial curse did affect me. It is affecting my sister, and it is affecting pretty much everybody from my family. So that is, of course, a beyond fucked up thing, and I think that familial curses, no matter how much in the right you think you are, and I am not just saying this because I have been the victim of one, or rather, on the receiving end of one. I am never a victim, because I am a powerful practitioner, and I am taking steps to slowly whittle away this curse, and I'm glad to say that I have already destroyed most of it. However, I am still in the process of remedying it. Hopefully, it will be done in a couple of weeks. But to continue my story, because we will get there in a little bit. However, basically what happened was that this curse basically started the moment that we decided to address it, because Laguz brought it to the forefront, because I had also put in my contract with Njord that if there was anything that was preventing him or his people who were working on my behalf for me, or for him to bring me wealth, as was our agreement. Of course, I brought my own sacrifices, because as the old adage goes, the gods help those who help themselves, which in terms of ceremonial magic, which is what I basically did, I basically said to Njord, here you can have this much energy from me, and you can do this and that, and I will grant you blah blah blah. I'll do this task for you, that task for you, make me rich. Basically, is what I said. All right, so. Because, at the end of the day, I am someone who does believe that in order to properly do what I do, which is to say that I am healing myself and also healing others around me, you do need a good financial, solid basis for it. I do not think that that is selfish. I do not think that that is materialistic. I do not think that that is in any way, shape, or form impractical or unreasonable. I think, however, that I need to have a steady income, of course, in some way, shape, or form, to facilitate the expansion of my, magical tools and my arsenals and everything that I use in my practices. And of course, I want to be able to have the time and energy to help other people, which requires, in some way, shape, or form, uh, some form of affluence, because I have been helping people left and right over the past several years. I have, of course, initially mostly focused on myself, because you can't help others if you can't help yourself, as the saying goes. But I have literally been a couple times to the point of being almost burned out, because I kept, being where I am now, and then at the same time also helping others on the side, and also having to help myself for further and further, while also going through a very intense initiatory process, which is, of course, the process we are discussing with this rune here, and with other runes that preceded it, and with the other few runes that are still after it. So my point is, the moment that I decided that I was sick of my situation, as a magician, as a shaman, as a witch is supposed to do, when you are feeling that your situation is no longer adequate, then you start changing it, right? That is the purpose of magic. That is the purpose of being able to do ritual and bring those energies into your lives. And then you take action in the physical, of course, to facilitate it. Let's not forget that part. I'm, of course, very well aware of that. But basically, I decided it was time for a change. The change seemed to initially very strongly just, move in, and that was actually great. I really really appreciated the added finances, and basically then the AC broke, which was a bit more than what I got for that bonus, shall we say, and basically I was like, Njord, what the fuck? And he was like, well, listen, there is a familial curse, and I know that you already know about it, but you have not paid attention to it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about this curse. And I thought like, oh, I thought it was not going to be a big deal. And well, I basically was revealed through a friend of mine that there was apparently some sort of massive Hydra server created that was basically obfuscating this curse, and that basically made people forget about it. That basically made it so that you couldn't clearly see the structure of it. So my very first step was to, take baths. So I took 9 ritual baths, because I figured 9 is a sacred number in our tradition, 9 worlds. And I figured I'd take 9 baths, cleanse myself on every world in the 9 realms, and that way I will symbolize stripping myself clean on all levels. So, which is what I did. I used the appropriate herbs, I bought some bit candles, I bought incense, and all that stuff that you do. I made I burnt sage while I was taking the baths along with the incense, and I put herbs and blood and everything in the bath, and every night. So, for a while I had several cuts on my arm that I wasn't very happy with, because I don't really like self-harming, but hey, what are you going to do about it? So I thought, after the 9th night, and of course I had consulted deities like Isis and Air, and I had discussed assistance from Odin, from Morgan, and from Inari, the Japanese deity Inari, who is also a finance deity, and from Njord, of course, because we were pointed out by Njord and Inari. Actually, I should also mention here that we had this curse. So I initially mentioned Njord only because he's more relevant to the direct energies of this rune of Laguz, but I shall, of course, not neglect to mention Inari, who has been a very wonderful how to put this, spiritual business relation, I guess I'll call it. So basically, I was just under the assumption that after 9 days that this curse was gone. I figured it was. Now, I know that the Hydra servitor that was created by these 100 people, and I'm actually very impressed with this outcome, even though the curse was not removed yet, because I'm just one guy up against a curse that was placed several hundred years ago. In other words, the curse steamrolled, gained traction, gained more influence, more people that fed it, because the people that placed it also installed a parameter that basically caused the energy to not just be drained from our family, but also to flow to them. So somewhere there are a couple of assholes on this planet who are feeding off of the positive energy that my family is getting leached from them. So I, of course, fully aim to, at least as far as I'm capable, removing this from me and my personal offspring, because I cannot remove it from the rest of my family, of course, because, well, frankly, it is impossible to do that without them engaging in ritual. And now I, of course, don't have kids yet, which I do want eventually down the line, but I don't have kids currently, and knowing this, I actually think that that is currently a blessing. Because, I would hate to, have stuff go wrong for them, and then having to convince them to do all this ritual stuff, or having to do this for them. Like, say if I had like 2, 3 kids, I yeah, I would hate to have to do that, and knowing that I was actually the one who passed on that stuff to them in the first place. So I removed most of the structure of the curse, which is to say it is no longer as effective. I did break that down, and I did remove that guardian. So now we are working with a different deity, Frey, who is, of course, going to be my advisor slash guide for Ingwaz, because that is, of course, his rune, Ingvi Frey, Ingwaz. So that is going to be a very interesting thing for me to address, because it will be on Frey Faxi, which is, if you don't know, Frey's holiday, which will be on the 1st of August, in a couple days from now, that I will be hopefully finally completely removing and neutralizing this curse entirely. And so here we see that sometimes Laguz, with the element of water, works to, at the very least, begins or facilitates the destruction of something that is not of use, where it exposes something that needs to be addressed, but that it in and of itself, through its own power, cannot maybe necessarily entirely remove. Because I have taken the baths. I have taken these 9 baths, but I feel I need to take 9 more baths, which I will, of course, do, because I was actually told months and months ago by a friend of mine who runs a metaphysical store that she had received a message from Balder, and she said it was 18 fishes. Now I'm a fish. I'm a Pisces. 18. I took 9 baths, and I felt when I took the baths that 9 more were required. But my friend said to me, "You need to take 9 baths." So I assumed that maybe I'm biased, because that does happen sometimes. And basically, 9 baths is what I took. Now it turns out that I need to take 9 more baths. So 18, I need to be as a fish swimming in a bath while Laguz is being initiated. And, basically utilize that water element to cleanse it. Now, Ingwaz is an earth element, so there will be some earth rituals. Basically, I am finalizing removing this very old, very powerful familial curse with, of course, the help of gods that I called on, which I have paid in certain scenarios and cases to assist me with the removal and cleansing, which, is understandable. It's a massive curse, and it was even my understanding that one deity alone would have a bit of a harder time to actually remove this curse in its entirety as well. So that's why I had a whole group of them basically collect, so that I would be assured that if it was removed, it would have been done properly. And of course, through my own efforts, through my own physical exertions to facilitate the magic, Yeah, so basically that is another aspect to Laguz, where water will be used in healing magic, where it will be used in basically rituals of that nature, and it will also not just usually, and it will also sometimes not be able to by itself heal things, and that is perfectly okay because I have seen that with Urus, I have seen that with Burkano, I've seen that with other healing runes. And Ingwas, which is, I did not know this, but Ingwas in and of itself is also a form of a healing rune. And of course, we will be discussing that once my initiation into that rune is completed. That basically concludes my, well, general discussion of what Laguz really is about and my personal experiences as a result of this initiation. Now, as I come out of Laguz with the making and editing and uploading of this video, Laguz will officially be completed. And that means that I will have mastered Laguz, and that means that I will be able to go to Ingwas. Now, what this means for me, hopefully, is that the contracts that I made will finally be able to start off, to take off. And I hope to not have such massive financial setbacks anymore. But we'll see, I guess. And yeah, so we now come to the divination part, which is probably the part that some of you have been waiting for. And I must admit, and I hope that you have been able to tell this, and I say this absolutely without shame, despite the title of the series. It's just the title. I'm not going to change it now so far in, but halfway into the Futhark, halfway into the series of these videos, I noticed that there was a shift where the focus became less so on the divinatory aspects of these runes, and that I started to more and more truly delve into the explicit meanings and the hidden meanings and the mystical meanings of these symbols. And I am perfectly okay with that. In fact, I prefer it. I think it does these runes much more justice than the divinatory aspects discussion that I used to mainly do. Now, do I regret not having done this earlier? Not really. The reason for this is that I very strongly feel that the first Aett is almost more of an intellectual understanding in many cases of certain energies and powers and influences that are around us at all times. And there are certain rewards, such as, of course, Gabo and Wunyo that we find. And Fehu, as I discussed earlier, some people theorize perhaps that Fehu is really the beginning of a new cycle that is better, or that it perhaps should be placed at the end of the Futhark, making it the Ufak, of course. And I find this a very interesting theory for this very reason, because of the yeah, because of the energies that have become so much more intense behind every initiation. And that is not to say, of course, that I have not, seen the energies at work. Absolutely, that is the case. I mean, for example, with Raido, travel, that is when I moved to the United States, and that is when I left my home country behind, of the Netherlands. That's when I moved to the United States, to a different continent. And that's where I, started being more in touch with what is now my best friend, Gabo. And then Wunyo, I finally arrived here, happiness. So these are absolutely not, I'm not trying to discredit in any way, shape, or form the first Aett or my videos that I did on them. It is just that I feel that now that I understand how the process works, and now that I understand how basically the runes, how they operate, and how this initiatory process basically unfolds itself every time, which of course is a little different depending on the rune. But I do really feel that I am now more able to do justice to them, and that the energies don't lend themselves so much anymore to the more intellectual understanding. And I mean, that makes sense, because if you think about it, if you are someone who takes up an initiation into the Futhark, the very first few runes that you are going to be doing, you are not going to yet fully comprehend exactly what you've gotten yourself into. In most cases, at least, I don't think that you will, because you are going to enter into that divination or into that initiation. And even if you have as I said, an intellectual understanding of it, you will not quite understand it on a energetic spiritual level. And that, I think, is the whole point of it. You're gradually made comfortable with it, and gradually you'll be enlisted into that mindset, into that surrender to these energies. Because make no mistake, if you become initiated into the runes, they will run your fucking life until you're done with the initiation. Okay? They are running my life. Nothing happens in my life that is not preordained or orchestrated by these energies. If that disturbs you, don't do it. But I am overall absolutely not in any way, shape, or form regretting it. Now, I say overall because I have had my moments, like I said. This rune has left me a little reeled. I'm not gonna lie. The shit that transpired, because I haven't even told you all of it. I have been so incredibly swamped. I have been so incredibly busy, and just it's supposed to be my summer break right now from the college that I attend to study psychology. But I can't say that I have had any sort of rest or recuperation, and my college starts in about a month. So, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I have been thoroughly shaken by the tsunami that was Laguz. But I also know that it brings with it the promise of more healing. And not only more healing, because Ingwaz, as I said, the rune of self-actualization, the rune of peace, of harmony, and the rediscovery of your own divinity. And that is something I look very much forward to. As a magician, as a person residing on this planet who will have his wishes and desires come to fruition, and as someone who just likes to help other people find and discover that same thing, which is of course part of the reason I upload these videos to a public domain. Because I could say, you know what, I am understanding these runes and I am going to study them, and I'm going to be initiated into them, and I'm going to keep it a very closely guarded secret. No, I am not of the opinion that this is the right way to go about it, because at the end of the day, if you want to use these symbols effectively, you will have to go through the initiation personally anyway. And believe me when I say, these energies are perfectly capable of finding ways in your life to educate you on them. You don't need a mentor for it. You don't need anything for it. In fact, I would recommend that you don't subjugate yourself to human mentors. I would recommend that you let the energies of the universe, the energies of spirits, perhaps, if you find them trustworthy, guide you, assist you. But anyway, enough chatter about that. Let's move on to the divination aspect of Laguz. So Laguz upright, and what it means in divination. Laguz upright in a divination setting may mean heeding your psychic and intuitive messages. It may mean the enjoyment of sexual energy. Some people, when you look online, will describe it as a sexual madness. Now, I personally interpret this as sexual passion, like being in the throes of passion. Now, of course, this may be because I am a Pisces, and as water signs are traditionally known as being very sexual individuals. Now, I'm not saying that other signs cannot be, of course, but it is a reputation that supposedly we have. All right, fair enough. I guess that fits me. But basically, it can also mean that that there are currently calm, steady waters in your life. This all, of course, a reminder for everybody. All these meanings depend on the intuitive messages that you are receiving, the context of the questions that you are asking, the context of the situation, of the energies, and how you phrase the question, of course. So please do keep that in mind, because some of these things may seem a little conflicting at times, I suppose. sexual madness, and then at the same time calm, steady waters. These may seem a little conflicting because the one is violent and the other one is, of course, very calm and collected. So that does depend on the kind of question you're asking and how you're asking it. So, in terms of the calm and steady waters, in other words, that means that things are going smoothly, that they're going steadily, that there is very little upheaval, and any upheaval that might be present may just be like the waves just gently, rocking here and there, because that is the nature of water. It is never entirely still. So water will always have some upheaval, it will always have some rockiness to it. But overall, it will be no more than, like a coworker, being a little rude to you or something like that, on a given day because their day is shit or for some reason like that. So these things are obviously just to be taken as a part of life. Now, Laguz, like Peripheral and Birkenau, is of course traditionally, as I mentioned earlier in my discussion of my own initiatory process and at the general description at the beginning, is traditionally a very feminine rune, meaning that there may be aspects of femininity, perhaps lunar energies involved in your reading. Laguz is an encouragement to go with the flow, to let things happen as they are unfolding, and to not interfere too much. This is different from, say, Naudis or Isa, because in those two cases you are more bound by necessity or because of outside factors, or perhaps because from an internal thing, as is more often the case perhaps in Naudis, where there is like a mental blockage or some sort of thing. But of course, Naudis can also represent an external binding factor. But basically, in the case of Laguz, there is an option for you to do things rather than where Isa says don't do it or you'll break shit. Whereas Naudis says you just can't move. But in Laguz, it is more the case that if it presents itself to you in such a context that you are recommended to just let things be and just go with the flow. So there is a distinct difference there. Okay, so to reiterate, with Laguz, go with the flow. With Isa, it is don't push shit or you'll break it. With Naudis, it is there is no way that you're going to move shit. The end. So that is the simple distinction and difference there. So don't fix what isn't broken is basically Laguz's message. Laguz can also indicate that there is a need for healing, especially in emotional, mental, and spiritual disorders and issues. Laguz can also be used as a rune to intuitively assist with discovering what is hidden, due to its association with the psychic element of the world, of course. Laguz also represents possibilities and the abilities to shape a situation like one would direct the flow of water. Now, that means to say that you have, in the cases where Laguz shows up, you have the capability of altering a situation to your liking because the situation is fluid. Therefore, you can, mold it to your liking, or at least direct it if you can't directly mold it. And more likely with Laguz's energy and the way Laguz operates, because it is a violent, sometimes unstructured energy, it is more likely that you can gently nudge it and guide it with some prudence, of course, rather than completely mold it according to your shape. So, Laguz upright, an example in divination. You may see Laguz appear in a reading where you are perhaps inquiring about a matter of intuition. For example, you are inquiring about whether you should commit to a certain individual as a spouse. You may have already, had a gut feeling about them, whether they are trustworthy or not, but you may have ignored it so far. And in this case, if Laguz, for example, shows up as the challenge rune, you are being called on to listen to your gut feeling. And then the surrounding runes for the future and the outcome, perhaps, will likely indicate what will happen if you fail and what will happen if you succeed in heeding the warning. As it is, your gut feeling in this case is likely spot on, and it will encourage you to basically listen to that gut feeling to avoid a potential disaster, or perhaps to miss out on a chance of, finding true love, perhaps. So the upright Laguz and spiritual meaning associated with it. Well, I feel that most of the spiritual meanings of Laguz have obviously already been discussed earlier in this video, as I have undergone the very intense energies, of course, already myself. To add a little bit on top of that for the purpose of this section, I think that Laguz is a rune which calls us to be conscious about our actions and how we react to things. Like I said, it is about finding your center, about going with the flow. That sometimes the best course of action is perhaps to just ride the waves, ride it out, and just see where you end up. And I do feel that it does encourage us to enjoy life, to go steady and calm in life, to appreciate it, and to understand that, you know, there are always going to be things wrong here and there. Life is never going to be perfect. And that the ebbing and flowing of the tides and the bobbing of the waves are always going to be a part of our lives, whether that is our daily lives, whether that is our spiritual lives, and whether that is basically the state of the world, because the world is constantly in flux and the world is constantly always in motion, and there is never a time when the world is not moving. It will move whether you like it or not. It will move with you or without you. And unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, that is something that we will just have to learn to adapt to. And once you can do that, there is, of course, going to be a sort of peace and calmness that you will find within yourself to do that. And furthermore, it is also a call to appreciate the calmer times when we have them, because humans, unfortunately, due to our evolutionary, uh, you know, evolved bias, to our evolutionary cognitive bias, in order to combat and seek out, in order to combat and remedy danger, we have a predisposition towards negativity, because we had to focus historically and evolutionarily speaking on dangers in order to remedy it, to survive, to make sure that in nature we would thrive and to not be prey to predators or other humans who are out to harm us, perhaps. So this is something that we do need to understand, that there is a need for a conscious, energetic redirection of energy towards the positive, where we should start focusing on the positive intentionally. Because if we do not, it's going to be a snowball of negative effects and cycles, of course. And this is the aspect where the psychic intuitive gifts come in, because that is, of course, the law of attraction, as they call it, where you put something out and it gets reflected back at you by the universal energies, and you receive more of what you are putting out. So if you are putting out negative, then you are drawing in more negative. And this is, of course, a very nasty cycle. I completely agree with you if you view it that way, because there are certain situations which you obviously cannot help, but there is also a need for adaptation there, like water, again, where we can flow, go with the flow, and to be able to adapt, to be able to channel our psychic strengths in order to make the universe bend to our will, by knowing when to exert a certain kind of energy in order to attract that kind of energy into our reality, even though at present we may perhaps have the opposite of what we are striving for. And that is what a lot of the trap is, of course, of where a lot of people fail in the metaphysical, because magic, like anything else, it is a skill. It is something that any of us can do, but it is something that we need to learn to understand, learn to do, learn to control in that sense. And if you are someone who experiences negative things, and you then put out more negativity, then you're going to attract more negativity towards you. And from a need to feel cradled and nurtured as human beings, the way we, of course, evolved to, to care for our offspring and to be cared for by our progenitors. This is an incredibly fucked up idea, but this is apparently the way that the universe and energy works in our present and current reality. So Laguz is also in that sense about your need to perhaps alter the way that you direct your psychic intuitive energies. So, Laguz in converse and its meaning in divination. Laguz in converse to me symbolizes that one needs to be careful at this time around water or perhaps water related topic, and some say even around water related people, such as sailors or perhaps even people like yours truly, water signs. I mean, this is quite funny because I have a friend who's a Scorpio, and I actually got into a fight with her right before I completed my initiation. Uh, I hadn't even thought about this particular thing because it's if you look online on all these websites, for converse divination with Laguz, you will see take care to be wary around people associated with water, such as mariners. And I was like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? But yeah, so I just got into this fight with a Scorpio, and the Scorpio is a water sign. So that was kind of interesting. It kind of basically was Lagus's way of saying "fuck you." There is legitimacy in this in this meaning, and I was like, okay, point made. So anyway, basically to continue, you may Lagos may warn of undercurrents that are either building or that are already at work, already at play in your reality, but that may not yet have come to the forefront in your life. So, in other words, there is a potential for there to be a quote unquote Lagos reverse, but the converse is basically an early warning that there may be a undercurrent that is potentially going to come into your reality unless steps are taken in order to either redirect these currents or to halt them and block them off in some way, shape, or form. In other words, things are not going wrong or wrong yet, but it could become much worse if action is not taken or if preparations are not made. So think of Lagos converse as a sort of a warning of a potential flooding almost. You can either build a dam to block it off, to make sure that it doesn't hit you, or you need, in other words, to stay away. In the case of the water-related people, for example, stay away from individuals like that for a bit, or you need to remove yourself from the area, or you risk things escalating. So Lagos converse, an example in divination. Suppose that there are tensions building in your circle of friends. You may have a group trip planned to, I don't know, to a lake or a pool or anything, like a I don't know, a collective swimming party, or I don't know, maybe you're taking a picnic by the beach or whatever. You cast the runes, and converse Lagos shows up as the future or challenge rune, and you all get together in what seems to be a meeting of friends, like you've done many times before, perhaps. And at this pool or lake meetup or picnic or party or whatever, you basically get into a fight with one of your friends. And in this case, Laguz basically just warned you that something associated with water, which in this case is either the location or perhaps the friend that you got into a fight with was a water sign, that would cause trouble and even an escalation of trouble, perhaps. So Lagos converse, its spiritual meaning. Lagos converse in a spiritual sense to me feels like a misdirection of energy or perhaps a misapplication of your time, energy, and efforts. So to recite the quote of Sun Tzu that I quoted earlier, water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. In this context, so unless you readjust your course or plan of attack or action or your unless you readjust your course or plan or action, you will find little results waiting for you, or perhaps the results may have a potential down the line to be negative instead. Water is flexible and can and does bend, however. It needs to seep through the cracks, to seep in between the cracks. So too must you be flexible in carrying out your whatever it is that you basically want to carry out in order to see the results that you are hoping for. So Laguz reverse and its meaning in divination. Laguz in reverse indicates chaos, upheavals, often of a nature that is outside of your control, similar to a tsunami perhaps. No human, obviously, can stand within the path of a tsunami and have a decent chance of surviving. I mean, I suppose it's happened a couple times, I guess, but probably not. So, alternatively, it can mean that one needs to pay closer attention to one's spirituality and your needs. Maybe it means that you may be called on to call closer attention to your intuition in order to resolve a situation because you are ignoring the intuition entirely. So this is different from the example that I cited in Laguz Upright, in that you are considering your intuition, but you're not really paying attention to it in a degree that you must. In this case, you are either actively ignoring your intuition or fighting against it. Or maybe you are entirely ignoring your spirituality. Maybe you are drifting closer from your connection to the divine, to the universe, to the source, whatever. Maybe you have been neglecting your honoring of perhaps the ancestors, of the gods, of who knows. Basically, what constitutes a healthy, sensible spirituality for you is being ignored. So it can also be a call to heed and honor and respect your internal emotions. Now, the water element is often associated with a person's emotions, and it may mean that Laguz is calling on you to pull yourself out of your over sentimentality and your excessive emotion. Perhaps you have, languished in self-pity for far too long, and this rune is basically showing up. This is what you are doing, and you should pull yourself out of it. Otherwise, things are going to become much worse for you. So Laguz reverse an example in divination. Suppose that you are doing a reading on your emotions and internal makeup. You have had a breakup with your spouse perhaps almost a year or perhaps even longer ago. Laguz in reverse in this case then may show up if you are doing a reading on this, on why you still feel like shit perhaps. And it may then indicate that you are basically still languishing, that you may perhaps be in pain and that you may still be longing needlessly for this other person, and this rune may then be a wake up call. If, for example, appears in the challenge slot, where it then basically says the person is gone, likely has moved on, and that it is basically recommending that you are moving on for your own mental and emotional health, and that you start doing the same. That you pick your life back up, and that you start taking action towards moving on with your life and improving your life once again. Perhaps you will start wanting to heal from this breakup. You will start to want to perhaps work towards finding a new, more suitable spouse for yourself. So Laguz, finally, reverse the spiritual meaning that I will depart on you. And again, of course, most of all this has been discussed in the earlier sections. But Laguz in reverse to me indicates that certainly after what I have experienced, there are situations that even the gods can't help themselves with. Because, I mean, I made a contract with Njord, for example, like I mentioned earlier. Njord agreed to deliver me wealth and finances. And he has not been able to do that thanks to my initiation into Laguz, ironically. So I'm going to assume that after this is done, that he will be able to do so. I am actually confident in that because he has shown to me that he is capable and willing to do it in the month preceding the hitting of the flood, as it were. So, in this case, so too must we recognize, despite the fact that we are divine beings and that we have the divinity that rests within us, we must understand that sometimes there are situations which happen that we have little to no control over in a direct sense, and that we must ride the waves, in other words. And certainly if we did not see them coming, because I mean, magic is a very effective tool to alter reality, of course, and so is this manifestation that we can do. However, magic, of course, takes a while to work sometimes. And oftentimes I find that the bigger the spell, the bigger the results, but the slower that it works. So, that there is a need for adaptation, even as a magician, even as a shaman, and even as a witch, perhaps, or whatever you call yourself. that there is a need for adjustment and being able to go with the flow and not be always that rigid with your wants, your desires, and with the way you execute your magic. And of course, there is always, of course, in high stress situations, the possibility that we may block our magic subconsciously by focusing too much energy on it after it is over, after the magic has been cast, I mean by that. And perhaps the situation feels to you like you've already been swept aside by a tsunami or a flash flood. And it is in such situations important that you remain calm and that you find your center of peace and quiet within, that you reorganize, that you put out these positive energies, as hard as it may be to do. I am fully aware of that. How that's what I said. I feel reeled from this initiation. It has been probably one of the most hard initiations that I have endured through the Elder Futhark. One of the most. I think there were a couple of other runes like I was and now this probably that was a very unpleasant one as well. That's basically, it has left me with a sense of, whoa, what the fuck just hit me? And that is exactly the embodiment of a reverse Laguz. It is a flash flood, a torrent, a tide, a whirlpool, a tsunami, basically things that just have to do with water that just hit you, and you're just standing there with a sense of, what the fuck just happened? Or you're dead, So it is basically a necessity to, in these cases, regroup, to take back what was lost if possible, to repair it, or to overcome the odds stacked against us. So that concludes my video on Laguz, which is probably one of the more lengthy videos, if not perhaps maybe the lengthiest video I have done on a rune, which is suitable considering the very thorough initiation I underwent as a result of this rune. I am actually very happy that I finally finished this, as you can probably tell, even though it has, as I said earlier, repeatedly, it has left me reeling. It's probably part of the reason why I'm glad that I'm done with it, and I very much look forward to Ingwaz, because I understand that the beginning of Ingwaz may be unpleasant because it's going to confront me with certain internal blockages that yet remain. But I do feel that Laguz has actually prepared me better for this, to expose them, to know what I'm actually looking at. And to know why I'm looking at it and why I'm going to be dealing and doing that internal work with it. But of course, it could also be that Ingwaz has other surprises in store for me. In fact, I believe it does. It is, after all, the rune of peace, of harmony, of self-actualization, like I said. Ingwaz is the rune of Ingvi Frey, the man who became a god, because that is what the Anglo-Saxon rune poem infers. I mean, it basically says that Ingvi Frey was a great hero first seen among the East Danes, and that he was named so by these people, and that he then departed with his chariot. And basically now we know that, of course, Frey, the brother of Freya, is Ingvi Frey, and that he is a deity. So if the East Danes knew him, if he was supposed to be a legendary king or hero of some sort, or chieftain or whatever, then that to me is a very strong proof that he is someone who, like Odin, I strongly suspect, was at one point a human being who ascended into the realm of divinity, which is, of course, something that you left-hand path people will be very familiar with. And I often say that I walk the middle way, but I also am someone who probably overall leans a bit more towards the left-hand path. I'm very well aware of that. because I do recognize a supreme creator. I do recognize a source. I do give homage to it, if you will. I do give, reverence to it in that sense, that it is my point of origin and that is why I am here. But at the same time, I also have no intention of stopping after I'm dead, shall we say. So, there is a self-actualization part that is very appealing to me in that rune, and the, well, ascension aspect of it that is also very appealing to me, because at the end of the day, why would you put all this work into magic? Why would you put all this work into it if at the end all you're going to do is just yield and fade out? So that to me doesn't make sense. I want to see rewards for my efforts, and I'm sure that most of you who are of that mindset fully understand what I am talking about. And I am not saying that the right-hand path as such is stupid necessarily. I think it comes at it from a different angle, and I understand it because at one time I was a Christian. In that sense, I do feel that I was a right-hand path individual, I suppose, in that sense. Many organized religions, most organized religions, I would argue, are right-hand path, of course. And I don't find it appealing anymore. Now that I have truly found out who I am, now that I have discovered who I have in past lives been, the kind of person that I am on a soul level, I guess. I am someone who does not easily stop, basically. And I find that a very pleasant attribute within myself. And some people may frown on it and may think that that is arrogant. I do not think that that is arrogant at all. I think that that is ultimately why we are here. I think it is the goal of reality to change, to be in flux, to develop, to progress, to evolve, and to be a stagnant servant to something for all eternity without any sort of improvement, without any sort of development. Just being a servant to something all the time, everywhere, to always have to yield, it is something that is despicable to me. It is something that I find disturbing. Why would you want that? But then again, I used to think that I was a, subservient, lesser creature than the being known as Yahweh. And I now no longer think that. And I have good reason to think that, because if you, of course, investigate religions, you see that Yahweh is a very vain, prideful, arrogant, jealous individual, and many other, beings like you find in the Abrahamic religions. Allah is pretty much the same way. Some people say they are the same being. Um, you know, so many deities, of course, display negative traits, and this is understood. But at the same time, there is also the difference between what I see as pagan gods and what I see as mainstream religion deities of particularly the Abrahamic strands, where I feel that beings Allah and Yahweh, they are very oppressive. They subjugate. They want others to just serve them, no matter what. Other gods, of course, have servants. They have spirits that work for them, people that work for them. They accept devotees. They accept priests. They accept allies. I like to think I am an ally of my gods. I'm not so much a worshipper or follower. I walk in their footsteps, but I do not work for them in that sense. I have made that very clear to them, and I think that they understand and respect that. And I think that the Futhark, as you are led through it, will slowly nudge you in that direction. I think it will slowly tell you, especially with the rune Ingwas as it is coming up, that it is a good thing to want to stand on your own legs. I mean, independence is independence, industriousness. These are all things that are, uh, you know, expressed by heathens and Norse Germanic pagans, and Asatru as being part of the noble virtues, and all these positive qualities, and I agree with that, even though I do not identify with a specific group. I do, however, identify as a eclectic pagan who happens to focus on the Germanic Norse aspect of things because it's where I'm from. It's the folk soul, folk spirit, I guess, that I identify with most because that is the country of origin where I was born and raised in. It is my heritage. It is my ancestry. And that is, of course, as we will discuss in Ophila, a very important part of our genetic makeup of who we are as an individual. Because we are more than the sum of our parts, but at the same time, the sum of our parts also form the foundation of who we are. So these are all things that we will be discussing in these final 3 runes. And that sigh of relief there was pretty genuine. I mean, I have no idea what's in store for me in the last 3 runes, of course, but I do have a feeling that with Laguz, the worst of it has been dealt with, shall we say. So I may be wrong. I may be in for a very nasty surprise. Don't quote me on it. But wow, yeah. No, I am glad this initiation was over. I'm glad it is over because wow, I've been fucked up by it. I mean, I've been fucked up by it. Let me repeat that a third time. I've been fucked up by it. So yeah. Thank you all so much for watching. I have no idea what video I will be uploading next. It will likely not be a Rune Divination video, Elder Futhark video in the next few months, because the initiation will take how long as it will take, and usually that's a couple months. So I expect to see that in the not too distant future, but I will definitely be continuing with the other series like Gods and Goddesses, which I have several of them planned. So I guess one of them will be soon for that particular series. And my Laguz series that I recently started, my introduction to healing magic, where I will be giving you various different rituals and tips and hints for exorcisms and cleansings and blessings and uncursing and uncrossing baths and all that good shit that we will be discussing. So please stay tuned. And again, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Hail!